The night was heavy on the alien world, its twin moons casting pale light over a market that never slept. Strange creatures moved under glowing lamps, their voices low, their eyes shifting, trading lives as if they were nothing more than objects. The smell of iron, sweat, and burning oils filled the air, mixing with the cries of those locked in cages. This was no ordinary bazaar, it was a market of chains, where the weak were sold and the cruel grew rich. A human traveler walked through its narrow paths, his boots crunching against the dust and scraps scattered on the ground. His coat was worn, his face shadowed, his eyes sharp with caution. He had come looking for supplies, maybe fuel, maybe food, but he had not expected this. Slaves of different races stood shackled, their heads bowed, their hope long gone. Some were chained to posts like animals, others locked in iron cages that rattled whenever they moved. The human slowed his steps, uneasy, his heart heavy as he saw a childlike figure pulled by the neck with a collar. The slaver yanked the chain and laughed, showing off his property to possible buyers. The child's eyes glowed faintly, not human eyes, but wide, alien and filled with fear. Her body was thin, her skin bruised, her voice weak. When the crowd ignored her, the slaver kicked her aside like a broken toy. The human clenched his fists but kept walking. He knew this place was dangerous. One wrong move and he could end up in chains himself, yet something inside him burned. A quiet anger that whispered he could not turn away. As he passed the darker stalls, a faint voice reached him. Soft, trembling, desperate. "Please, can you buy me? Take me away." The words froze him in place. He turned his head and there she was. A young alien girl, chained like a dog to a post. Her wrists bound, a collar around her neck. Her hair tangled, her skin marked with scars. But her eyes, those glowing eyes, looked straight at him. Her lips quivered as she whispered again, "Can you buy me and take me as your slave, please?" The human felt a chill run down his spine, not from fear, but from the weight of her plea. The crowd around laughed, pointing at her as if her words were a joke. "Look at that one begging to be taken, worthless creature," one alien sneered. "Not even worth the chains she wears," another said with cruel laughter. The girl lowered her head, tears shining as they fell onto the dirt. She was not asking for freedom, not asking for kindness, only begging for an escape from worse cruelty. To her, even a stranger's chain was better than the suffering she already knew. The human's breath grew heavy, his heart thundering in his chest. He looked around, rough slavers, cruel bidders, guards with sharp weapons. Every eye was on the market's trade. He knew if he spoke, if he made a move, it would draw attention. It would mean stepping into danger he could not fully control. But those eyes, those broken yet pleading eyes, held him like chains stronger than steel. He could almost hear her thoughts behind the trembling words. "Please, don't walk away, don't leave me here." The slaver tugged the chain harshly, making the girl stumble. "Pathetic thing," the slaver spat. "Not even worth feeding. I'll sell her cheap to anyone who wants a pet." The laughter grew around them, cruel, sharp, echoing in the night. The human stepped closer, his hand unconsciously brushing the few coins he carried. He could feel the heat of the stares already. Though no one yet noticed his interest, he knew if he tried to buy her, he would mark himself in this place. And once marked, there would be no going back. The girl raised her head slowly, her eyes wide and wet, locking onto his face. Her lips moved once more, weak but filled with desperation. "Please, take me." The noise of the market seemed to fade. The shouts, the laughter, the rattling of cages, everything drowned in silence inside his mind. Only her voice remained echoing, pulling at something deep within him. For a moment he stood frozen, his thoughts warring with the danger pressing in on all sides. But his heart, louder than his reason, whispered the truth. He could not walk away, not this time, not when a child in chains was begging for someone to see her, to hear her, to choose her life over cruelty. The human took a slow breath, his eyes narrowing, his jaw set with a decision. The market of chains had many buyers that night, but only one who did not come looking for a slave, and yet, fate had brought him to the girl with the glowing eyes, and as the slaver laughed again, pulling the chain, the human stepped forward, ready to speak, ready to act, unaware that this one choice would set fire to everything in the cruel market, and change both their lives forever. The air around the stall grew heavier as the human stepped closer. The slaver squinted at him, his sharp teeth glinting under the lamps, his grip tightening on the chain tied to the alien girl. "Interested, human?" The slaver hissed, his voice thick with greed. She is weak, but she still breathes. Make me an offer. The human's jaw tensed. He felt every eye in the market turn toward him, some mocking, some curious, some hungry for trouble. The girl lowered her gaze again. Too afraid to look at him directly, her body trembled, the metal collar around her neck rattling with every small movement. She thought maybe he would walk away like all others, but then his hand moved to his belt pouch, the faint sound of coins shaking in the silence. The slaver's grin widened. "Ah, so the human wants her," he said, looking around proudly as if showing off his power. "Don't worry, she's cheap. No one else wants trash like this." The crowd chuckled cruelly, their voices echoing in the narrow alley. The human pulled out the pouch and held it in his palm. His eyes stayed fixed on the girl, not on the slaver, not on the crowd, only her. "This is enough," he said firmly. "I'll take her." The slaver's face twisted in mock surprise, then greedy delight. He snatched the pouch and quickly counted with sharp, dirty fingers, pathetic human coins. "But they'll do, she's yours." With a yank, he threw the chain toward the human, the girl stumbling forward into his arms. Gasps and murmurs ran through the crowd. Some laughed louder, some whispered darkly, and a few stepped back, sensing trouble. It wasn't normal for a human to buy from this market. Not here, not under these cruel rules. He was marked now, a foreigner interfering in their games. The girl collapsed to her knees, her hands still bound, her breathing unsteady. She dared to lift her head just slightly, eyes shining with confusion and fear. Why did you?" she whispered, but her words died when he crouched and touched the chain gently. With one sharp pull, he tore it from the slaver's hook, wrapping the loose links around his hand. "You're coming with me," he said, his tone steady, calm. But inside his chest, his heart was racing. The girl blinked, unable to believe the weight of those words. She was not sure if this human was different, or if she had just traded one master for another. The slaver smirked, stuffing the coins into his pocket. "Take her, human, but don't blame me when she dies in your care." The laughter grew louder again, echoing like knives in the night, yet under it all, the girl heard something new, the sound of a human's footsteps leading her away. They walked through the crowd, the human pulling the chain gently but firmly. Eyes followed them, some filled with mockery, others with anger. One alien whispered, "That human will regret it." Another muttered, "The hunters won't allow this." The girl's steps were weak, her knees shaking with each movement. She expected at any moment for the chain to snap back, for the slaver to pull her down. But no, the human kept moving forward, not rushing, not afraid, as if his path was set. Every time her eyes lifted, she saw his back, tall, steady, like a shield against the cruel world behind them. At the edge of the market, the human stopped, turning to face her. He knelt so his eyes were level with hers, his voice low but clear. "You're not safe yet. But you're no longer theirs." Her lips parted. Her breath caught, she couldn't understand. Not safe, yet not theirs. What did that mean? What kind of master spoke like that? Her trembling fingers touched the chain still wrapped in his hand. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Am I yours now?" The human hesitated, his eyes softening. "For now," he said, but not in the way they wanted. Those words struck her deeper than chains ever had. For years she had been an object, a thing, something to be sold. Now this stranger's voice carried a weight she had never known. Respect, maybe even mercy, she wanted to believe. But fear still held her heart. The human rose again, guiding her carefully through the dim alleys until the noise of the market faded behind them. His small ship waited on the outskirts, worn but strong, its lights faint against the dark sky. He paused at the ramp, loosening the chain in his hand. "You'll come inside," he said, "and you'll eat. Then we'll talk." The girl froze, her body shaking. She could not remember the last time someone said she would eat. Her throat ached, her stomach twisted in emptiness. Her heart both feared and hoped. She wanted to ask if this was real, if kindness could exist in such a cruel galaxy, but all she could do was nod faintly. Her glowing eyes fixed on him, behind them, unseen. Shadows lingered at the edge of the market. Enforcers watched, their cold eyes narrowing, their voices low. "The human took her," one muttered. "We'll follow." The chain may have been broken, but danger had only just begun, and as the ship's ramp closed behind them, sealing them away from the bazaar, the girl sat quietly, her wrists still bound, her body still weak, but deep inside, a tiny spark lit for the first time in years. Not freedom, not yet, but something close, hope. fragile and trembling but alive. The small ship hummed as its engine settled. The ramp closed and the outside noise of the cruel market faded away. Inside, dim lights glowed across the narrow cabin, the smell of oil and metal replacing the stench of chains and burning torches. The human set his bag down, then turned toward the trembling girl who still knelt near the door. Her wrists bound, her head lowered. She looked out of place here, too fragile, too broken, as if even this ship was too clean for her scarred presence. For a moment, silence hung heavy, broken only by her shallow breathing. Then the human stepped forward and crouched in front of her. He reached for the chain still wrapped around his hand and slowly unwound it, letting it drop with a dull clang onto the floor. The girl flinched at the sound, as if expecting punishment, but nothing came, only the quiet voice of the human. "You're safe here," he said softly. "No one will hurt you while you are with me." Her glowing eyes lifted. Full of doubt, full of fear, she whispered, "Safe?" as if the word was foreign on her tongue. The human nodded, then rose and walked toward a small storage unit built into the wall. He pressed a panel and with a hiss the compartment opened, revealing sealed packs of food. It wasn't much, just dry rations, bread, and some fruit he had traded for. But compared to the scraps she had been given in the market, it was a feast. The girl's gaze followed his every movement, her stomach twisting painfully. She hadn't eaten properly in days, maybe weeks, yet she didn't dare move closer. She had been punished before for touching food without permission. The memory of a whip, of laughter as she starved, made her body tremble harder. The human glanced back and noticed, his heart tightening at her expression. Slowly, he unwrapped a piece of bread, placed it on a plate, and then set it on the small table between them. He stepped back, his voice calm. "Eat," he said simply. "It's yours." The girl's breath caught, her glowing eyes widened. She looked at the bread, steaming slightly, the smell warm and rich. Her hands shook against the rope binding her wrists, too afraid to reach out. "Eat," he repeated gently, this time moving to kneel again and untie the knots at her wrists. The rope fell loose, leaving raw red marks on her skin. The girl stared at her free hands, as if they were not her own. Slowly, she reached forward, trembling fingers brushing the edge of the plate. She lifted the bread carefully, almost reverently, and brought it close, her lips parted. Her teeth sank into the soft crust, and the moment the taste hit her tongue, her eyes filled with tears. It was warm, it was real, it was food without cruelty. Her shoulders shook as she chewed, not from hunger alone, but from the flood of emotions overwhelming her. She had eaten before, yes, but always with fear, always in chains, always as if survival was a punishment. This was different. This was given freely, no whip waiting, no laughter at her pain. The human sat quietly, watching her, his chest heavy. He had expected her to eat quickly, to devour it in desperation. But she ate slowly, carefully, as if each bite was both precious and dangerous. Tears streaked down her cheeks, yet she smiled faintly between them. For the first time in years, food was not shame. Food was kindness. When she finished, she lowered the bread with shaking hands. Her voice was hoarse, broken, but she whispered, Why do you give this to me? I am nothing. Just a slave?" The human leaned forward, his eyes steady. "You are not nothing," he said, his tone firm. "Not to me," the girl gasped softly, as if his words struck her harder than chains ever had. Her glowing eyes darted away. Unable to hold his gaze, she whispered again, her voice even weaker. "They told me I was only worth chains, worth pain." The human shook his head slowly. "They were wrong," he said. "They wanted you to believe that so you would never fight, never hope, but they were wrong." Her hands clutched her chest, as if trying to hold in the strange warmth building inside. It was terrifying, this feeling, almost as terrifying as the cruelty she had known. But it was different, it was soft, it was real for a moment. She dared to believe he meant it. The ship's lights flickered as systems hummed. Pulling her from her thoughts, the human rose and checked the controls, his voice carrying across the small cabin. "You'll rest here tonight. No chains, no bindings," he said. "Tomorrow, we decide where to go." The girl's breath quickened, her heart racing. No chains, no bindings, words she had never heard in her life. She curled against the wall, hugging her knees, still trembling. Her body did not yet understand freedom, but her heart, fragile and wounded, felt the first spark of it. The taste of bread lingered on her tongue, warm and sweet. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she fell asleep not from exhaustion but from peace. The human sat at the pilot's chair. Watching her silently, he knew danger would follow them. The market would not forget. The slavers would not forgive, but seeing her there, sleeping softly after tasting kindness for the first time, he knew he had made the only choice his heart could accept. And as the ship drifted quietly among the stars, two lives once bound by chains began to change. One step, one meal, one fragile spark at a time. The night passed slowly inside the small ship. Engines hummed softly, filling the silence with a low vibration. The human sat at the pilot's seat, his eyes heavy but refusing to close. He had been in dangerous places before, but tonight felt different, heavier, as if the weight of another's pain sat beside him. Behind him on the small bench, the alien girl slept curled into herself. Her thin arms wrapped around her knees, her head pressed against the wall. For a moment she looked peaceful, but every so often, her body twitched, her lips trembled, and a soft cry escaped. Her dreams were not gentle. They were chains of memory dragging her back into fear. She whimpered suddenly, jerking awake with a sharp gasp. Her glowing eyes wide, her breath fast and broken. Sweat covered her forehead, tears streaked her cheeks. Her hands flew to her neck as if expecting the cold bite of the collar again. The human turned quickly, his voice calm but firm. "You're safe. It was only a dream." But she shook her head violently, hugging her arms around herself. No, I felt it. The chain, the whip. They laughed. They laughed when I cried." Her words spilled out in a rush, her voice cracking under the weight of her memory. He moved closer but stopped a few steps away, careful not to frighten her further. "Listen to me," he said softly. "You are not there anymore, you are here, with me." The girl's chest heaved, her glowing eyes flickered between him and the floor. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "But it follows me, even here. It never leaves." The human's heart clenched, he knew those words too well. Chains could be broken, collars could be cut. But the past, those chains lived inside. He lowered himself onto the floor so he wouldn't tower over her. His voice steady. "The past leaves scars, yes. But scars do not mean you are still bleeding." The girl blinked, her trembling slowing as his words sank in. Her hands still gripped her arms tightly, but her breathing softened just enough for her to listen. "I don't know how to—" "Stop it," she whispered. "When I close my eyes, I see them, I hear them. I feel the chain." The human nodded slowly. "Then don't fight it alone, talk. Let me carry some of it." Her gaze snapped to his, her glowing eyes wide. "No one ever wanted to hear," she whispered. "No one cared." His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "I care," he said simply. "Maybe I cannot erase it, but I can stand with you against it." Tears spilled again. Running down her cheeks for a long moment, she said nothing, only sat there trembling. Then slowly she spoke, halting at first, then faster, as if afraid the words would vanish. She told him of her capture, of nights spent in cages, of chains that bit into her skin until blood ran, of slavers who laughed when she begged, who fed her scraps, who told her she was less than an animal. Her voice cracked, but she continued, her body shaking with every word. The human listened silently, his hands resting on his knees, not interrupting, not pitying, only listening, giving her space to spill the poison she had swallowed for years. When her voice finally broke completely, he moved just close enough to place a blanket around her thin shoulders. The gesture made her flinch at first, then slowly lean into its warmth. "You are no longer theirs," he said quietly. "Their words, their chains. They do not decide who you are." The girl pressed the blanket tighter, whispering, "Then who am I?" The human looked at her glowing eyes, at the scars marking her skin, at the fragile hope struggling to rise. "You are someone who survived," he said. "That makes you stronger than all of them." The girl's lips parted. No sound came out at first, her heart trembled, her mind fighting the weight of disbelief, but deep inside a tiny spark lit again, faint yet brighter than before. For the first time, someone had told her she was not weak but strong. The hum of the ship grew louder as dawn light broke outside the viewport. Yet inside, the shadows of the past still lingered. Heavy but slowly lifting, the girl lay down again, this time with the blanket wrapped around her. Her eyes closed, not in fear but in exhaustion, her breathing steadier than before. The human returned to his chair, his own heart heavy. He knew this was only the beginning. Her chains were not gone, only loosened, and outside, in the dark markets, whispers already spread. The human who bought a slave had defied the rules, and those who ruled the chains would not forgive. For now, though, In the small ship drifting quietly among the stars, the girl slept again, no longer completely alone with her nightmares. And the human kept watch, carrying both their burdens in silence, unaware that darker shadows were already moving toward them. The girl's sleep was uneasy but calmer than before, her soft breaths rising and falling under the blanket. The human sat at the ship's controls, eyes scanning the sensors, hands steady on the console. He had traveled dangerous routes before, but now he carried more than supplies. He carried a fragile life, and somewhere in his gut, he knew danger was not far behind. Outside, the stars drifted quietly. But in the space below, signals flickered, ships moving. Patterns forming, the human narrowed his eyes, his sensors catching faint traces of pursuit. It was no surprise. The market of chains never let go of its property easily. Slavers saw lost slaves as lost profit, and lost profit demanded blood. He rose and moved back to check on the girl, her glowing eyes half open now. She stirred, her voice weak. "Where are we going?" The human knelt beside her, adjusting the blanket. "Far from that place," he said. "Somewhere they cannot reach you." But his words carried more weight than comfort, because deep down he wasn't sure if anywhere was safe. Suddenly, a sharp alarm buzzed across the control panel. The girl flinched, clutching the blanket tighter. The human rushed back to the cockpit, scanning the flashing lights. A ship was closing in, larger, armed. Its signature unmistakable. It was a hunter's craft. The girl gasped, her body trembling. "They've come," she whispered. "The enforcers. They always come." Her voice shook as old fear poured back, her eyes glowing brighter with panic. The human gritted his teeth, his hand slamming the console. "They'll have to go through me first," he muttered. Moments later, a transmission crackled through the comms. A deep alien voice echoed coldly. "Human vessel, you carry stolen property. Surrender her at once or be destroyed." The girl's face paled, her hands gripping the bench as if chains had already returned. She whispered, "They will kill you. They will take me back, please." "Don't fight them." The human looked back at her, his eyes hard, his jaw set. "They will not take you," he said firmly. "Not while I draw breath," before she could answer. The ship jolted violently, laser fire grazing across the hull. The hunter's ship had fired a warning shot. But the next would not be so kind. The human pushed the thrusters, the ship diving through the asteroid belt nearby. Rocks loomed large, spinning silently in the dark void. He weaved between them, the engines roaring, sparks flying as enemy fire chased close behind. The girl clung to the seat, her glowing eyes wide, every jolt shaking her fragile body. The hunter's voice returned, cruel laughter in the comms. "Run, human, run as long as you like, but the chains always return." The girl shivered at those words, as if the hunter had spoken directly into her heart. But the human snarled back, "Not this time." He pushed the engines harder, the small ship darting like a shadow among the rocks. The hunter's craft was bigger, slower, but heavily armed. Every blast shook the asteroids around them, sending fragments spinning dangerously close. The girl covered her ears, the noise too much, the memories of whips and chains flooding her mind. Then suddenly the human ship jerked again, alarms screaming. A shot had clipped one of the stabilizers. The hull groaned, metal straining. The girl cried out, "We can't escape them." The human turned sharply, his eyes blazing with fire. "We don't escape," he said. "We fight." He swung the ship around, turning to face the hunter's vessel head on. The girl's breath caught, her voice shaking. "No, you'll be killed." The human gripped the controls, his hands steady. Better to fight for freedom than live in chains. With a roar of the thrusters, the small ship charged forward, weaving tight around the asteroids. The hunter fired again, blasts tearing through the void. But the human's maneuvers were sharp. Desperate, alive, he fired his own cannons, the first shot sparking against the hunter's shields. The girl gasped, watching the impossible. One human ship standing against a vessel made for breaking rebels. The hunter laughed again through the comms, but now anger twisted his tone. "You dare defy the chains, human? You will be broken." The human ignored him, his eyes locked on the fight, his heart pounding not for himself but for the trembling girl watching. He knew he had to show her something no chain could break. Minutes stretched into hours, the chase twisting through rocks, fire, and silence. The girl whispered prayers in her own language, clutching the blanket tight, and then at last, the human's desperate strike landed true. A shot pierced through the hunter's engines, sparks bursting across its hull. The larger ship staggered, its weapons faltering, drifting powerless among the asteroids. Silence filled the comms, the hunter's cruel laughter gone. The girl's eyes widened, tears streaming down her face. You fought for me, she whispered, her voice trembling. The human turned, sweat streaking his brow but his eyes still steady. I told you, he said softly. No one will take you while I live. The girl collapsed into sobs. Not of fear this time, but of something new, something she had never felt. She wept because for the first time in her life, someone had stood not to hurt her, not to own her, but to protect her. Her chains of the past still haunted her, but tonight, under the stars and the wreck of a hunter's ship, she saw proof that maybe chains could be broken, not just outside her body, but inside her heart. And as the small ship drifted away from the battlefield, its hull scarred but still alive, the human knew this was only the first fight. Many more would come. But for the girl, this moment was the first step toward believing in freedom. The hunter's threat had been real, but her hope had survived stronger. The stars stretched endlessly outside the viewport, the small ship drifting quietly after the battle. The hull bore scars, the engines groaned, yet it still moved forward, carrying 2 lives who had barely escaped the hunter's claws. The human sat at the controls, his breath slow but steady, sweat drying on his brow. Behind him, the alien girl sat clutching the blanket, her glowing eyes fixed on him, her heart still racing from what she had seen. Silence filled the cabin for a long while, broken only by the hum of the engines. Finally, the girl whispered, her voice fragile, You fought them. You could have died. For me? The human glanced back, his expression calm but firm. I told you, I will not let them take you. Her lips trembled, her eyes shining with tears. No one has ever fought for me. Never. He rose from the chair and walked slowly toward her, kneeling so his eyes met hers. You're not their property anymore, he said softly. Not a slave, not a thing. You are free now. The word free echoed inside her mind, sharp and strange. Her hand shook as she repeated it. Free, as if testing its meaning for the first time. But fear quickly wrapped around her hope. She shook her head, whispering, No, I can't be free. I don't know how. I was born in chains. I only know how to serve. Her voice cracked, her body trembling as old memories crawled back. What if I fail? What if I don't know what freedom means? The human's jaw tightened, his voice gentle but steady. Freedom is not something you fail at. It is something you live step by step. Breath by breath, he reached for a small knife on his belt, his hands careful, and lifted the broken collar still resting around her neck. With one swift motion, he sliced it away, letting it fall with a clang to the floor. The girl gasped, her hands rising to touch the bare skin of her neck. She felt light, strange, as though she had lost both a weight and a part of herself. Tears ran down her cheeks as she whispered, I don't feel real without it. The human looked at her firmly. You are more real now than you have ever been. He rose and stepped back, giving her space. You have a choice now, he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of truth. You can walk away when we land on the next world, live your own life, or you can stay with me, not as a slave, but as a companion. The girl froze, her glowing eyes wide, her heart twisted with fear and hope. The choice was hers, and that truth felt heavier than chains. She whispered, You would let me go. After all this. The human nodded slowly, because freedom means choice, and choice must be yours. Her body shook, her mind racing. She had dreamed of escape, but escape had always meant running into another cage. Now, for the first time, someone had placed the key in her own hands. It was terrifying, like standing at the edge of a cliff with no wings to fly. She rose unsteadily, her knees weak, and took a few trembling steps across the small cabin. She stared at the door of the ship, the path that could take her anywhere when they landed. Then she turned, her eyes locking onto the human, who stood quietly, waiting, not forcing, not commanding, her lips parted, her voice a faint whisper. If I walk away, I will be alone. If I stay, I don't know what I will be. The human nodded. That is the truth of freedom. It is uncertain, but it is yours. Her tears fell again, but this time they carried more than pain. They carried hope. Slowly, she walked back toward him, her small hands clutching the blanket, her voice trembling but clear. I don't want to be alone. Not anymore. I want to stay with you, not as property, not as slave, but as something more. His chest tightened, but he only nodded, respect in his eyes. Then you stay by your choice. Not mine, he said, his voice steady. The girl collapsed into quiet sobs, but they were softer now, almost relieved for the first time. Her decision had been her own, and no chain, no slaver, no hunter had forced it. Outside, the stars shone brighter, the endless galaxy opening before them. The human returned to the controls. Setting the course for distant worlds, the girl sat near him, her glowing eyes still damp but filled with something new. It was not yet confidence, not yet strength, but the first fragile seed of both. She looked at the human, her voice small but sure. "Thank you for giving me a choice." He didn't look back, but his voice was steady as the ship jumped into the stars. "That is what it means to be free." The ship sailed through the silence of space, its engines humming like a steady heartbeat. Scars lined the hull, a reminder of the fight they had survived, but inside there was a new kind of peace. The alien girl sat near the viewport, her glowing eyes fixed on the stars beyond. Each shining light felt like a promise, distant but waiting for the first time. She was not chained to a post, not locked in a cage. Her wrists were free, her neck bare, the cruel collar gone. She touched her skin often, as if reminding herself it was real, that she was no longer bound. Every breath felt lighter, strange but beautiful. The human worked quietly at the controls, checking systems, adjusting course. His movements were calm, steady, but his eyes softened whenever he glanced at her. He had carried burdens before, but this one was different. He wasn't just guiding a ship, he was guiding a broken soul toward something new. The girl turned to him, her voice trembling but stronger than before. "Where will we go now?" she asked. The human leaned back, folding his arms, his gaze steady on the stars. "Anywhere," he replied. "The galaxy is wide, and none of them can decide our path now." Her lips parted in awe, the word anywhere echoing like a dream. She had lived her whole life in one place, bound by chains, her world nothing but pain and commands. Now the horizon stretched without limits, without bars, without cages. She whispered the word again, "Anywhere," tasting its freedom. Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer heavy. It was soft, like the quiet after a storm. The air washed clean. The girl hesitated, then asked, "And what will I be?" "I don't know how to live as free." The human turned to her, his eyes firm but kind. "You will be what you choose to be," he said. "That is the power you have now." Her chest tightened. Her tears rose again, but this time they were not only from fear. Choice. It was a word she had never owned before, but now it belonged to her. Slowly she smiled faintly, shaky but real. "Then I choose to stay with you," she whispered. "Not as slave, but as companion." The human nodded once. No surprise in his eyes, only quiet respect. "Then we journey together," he said, and returned his gaze to the stars. Her heart warmed at his words, and for the first time she leaned back without fear. The galaxy felt wide and dangerous, but not hopeless. Not while he was there. Hours passed, the ship drifting toward new space. The girl wandered the cabin slowly, her steps uncertain but curious. Every button, every panel, every soft hum of the ship fascinated her. She asked small questions, and the human answered patiently, never mocking, never cruel. Her laughter came once, small and soft, surprising even herself. It echoed gently in the cabin, filling spaces where silence used to live. The human glanced at her, a faint smile pulling at his lips. It was not just survival anymore, it was life. Beginning again, but shadows still lingered far behind. The market of chains would not forget, the hunters would not forgive. The human knew one day more ships might come, more battles, more dangers, yet he also knew something had changed. He was no longer fighting only for himself, but for her, and that gave him strength. The girl sat again by the viewport, her glowing eyes brighter. She whispered softly, as if to herself, "I was once nothing, but now, maybe I can become something," the human heard. His voice low but steady. "You already are." Her breath caught, her heart trembling at the weight of those words as the ship cut through the void. The stars ahead looked less like cold fire and more like guiding lights. The girl pressed her hand against the glass, imagining distant worlds where chains did not exist, worlds where laughter was not cruel, where kindness was not a trick. She had never believed such places could be real. But now with him she dared to hope. She turned back, her voice small but filled with certainty. "Will you always protect me?" The human met her gaze, his eyes steady, his answer simple. "As long as I breathe." Her tears returned, but now they carried light. She wiped them quickly, a shy smile breaking through in her heart. The chains of the past still rattled faintly, but they were weaker now, and with each moment, each breath, each star that passed, she felt those chains fading. The human adjusted the controls, the ship preparing to jump again. The engines flared, light filled the cabin. The stars stretched into streams, the girl held her breath. Her eyes wide with wonder, she whispered, "It feels like flying." The human glanced at her, his voice quiet but strong. "It is flying," he said. "Your first flight into freedom." And as the ship vanished into the vast unknown, the girl closed her eyes, clutching the blanket. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. The past was not gone, the scars would remain, but the future was open. A new journey had begun, not of chains and pain, but of hope, choice, and stars.